Hello and welcome to another edition of Life Skills on GNAT-TV. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Today is June 28th, and we're delighted to have with us a distinguished panel, I should say, of folks who are here to help us answer and maybe even identify some questions we haven't even thought of yet around the whole issue of starting your own business. Many of us have had the dream or thought that, wow, I'd like to be my own boss someday. And that journey from employee to employer can be a rocky and perilous road filled with a lot of potholes. But the folks that we have here on our panel today, I think, are going to give us some real good advice on how we can steer around those little potholes. With us today, to start off, is Chris Harriman, who is an economic development specialist with the Small Business Administration in Vermont. Small Business Administration offers advice and programs to assist those in business and those seeking to join that group. Next to her is Joy Proft. She is the owner of Joy All Things Under Things, a well-known store here in Manchester. She's been in business for the past 5 years. Next to her is Al Clausen, who is the branch manager of the Richville Road branch of Berkshire Bank and a hardy veteran of life skills. He was on one of our early shows talking about managing personal finances. Did such a great job, we knew we had to have him back again. So thank you for coming back, Al.
Thank you.
And last but hardly least is Dwight Williams. He is the vice president and business banking team leader also at Berkshire Bank. And when this idea first surfaced, I was told immediately that we needed to have Dwight on the panel and be our go-to guy. So thank you all for being here today, carving the time out of what I know are some very busy schedules. I really appreciate it. Al, let's start with you. What's the starting point for someone who wants to, has just gotten some great idea and is ready to take that idea from laptop to bricks and mortar or whatever it's going to be? Where did they begin?
Well, I've seen this on many occasions. They come into the branch and they do have that idea. So first thing I want to discuss with them is, what exactly is your business plan? Have you developed a business plan? What exactly is your idea? Do you have a partner? Are you sole on this? So we kind of try to flesh out some things before we actually get to the financial piece of it. Because there's so much groundwork that you need to lay before you actually can get to that. But in terms of the business plan, they're going to want to look at things like that. Depending on the business, what is the cash flow going to be? Is it a startup business? Or is it an established business that they're purchasing? So lots of questions that you want to you ask up front before you actually get into the nuts and bolts of how you can help them financially.
So what should some of the elements of that business plan be? I mean, do you want to sit down and actually have a kind of a cash flow target or kind of estimates of what everything's going to cost? I mean, does it really need to be detailed?
It needs to be fairly detailed, especially if it's a startup. You're going to want to have years worth of projections. In the first year, you need to have it by month, and then thereafter you can do it quarterly. Proof of injection. Say they want to get a loan for $100,000. Are they carrying cash in order to support that? I mean, and those are some of the things in terms of financials that we would need to look at. Personal financial statements. What if it's a brand new business? What do they have for personal returns? So how is their credit going into this? Yeah, those are some of the things that we look at. And then the business plan itself is a lot more than the financials. That's just a piece of it.
Mm-hmm. I could talk to that a little bit. So there are lots of resources available to help someone write a business plan. And it's pretty standard about what needs to be included. What does the management look like? What do the financials look like? What's the marketing going to look like? What is it? A lot of times, the most challenging thing to get out of someone that wants to start a business is to have them describe what it is. Mm-hmm. What's your vision?
The elevator pitch?
Exactly. So is it a thing? Is it an idea? Is it an app? Is it, they have to be able to explain what it is and then take that and just expand on it, and then in the plan, in order to have someone in a logical manner be able to go through this plan and say, okay, this is what it is, this is where it's going to be, this is the market, this is how I'm going to pay for it, this is what I'm going to need to start it up, this is exactly the location, this is who I want to borrow the money from, this is where my money is coming from. And so there's really very specific things that need to be in there. However, as a person who used to be in banking both in San Francisco and in Vermont, I've seen them literally on the back of a napkin in San Francisco back in the day, you know, the app, the
J.K.
.com, yeah, right. That were pretty good, you know, we just had to beef it up a little bit. And then I've seen the, you know, really intense business plans that are, you know, 85 pages long, that didn't need to be, that could have probably been on the back of the napkin. So there's a big range, and then if you're going to build something that's very complicated, you may have one that's more the 85 pages. If it's a very simple project, you could have a very simple 5-10 page business plan. So it really depends on, you know, who you are, what you've done, whatever it is, and who you're talking to. You know, financial institutions are different as well. Some need a lot more than others.
Is there some kind of rule of thumb around how much of your own personal capital you should be prepared to invest to kind of leverage a business loan, or is there some magic number around that, or is it just, hey, you know, whatever it happens to be, if the idea sounds compelling and interesting and has a good chance of being successful, you sort of like look past that, or is it just kind of a...
Don't we wish that, right? Let's just look right past that.
No problem.
There's exceptions to every rule. Rule of thumb, generally speaking, you add up the entire project, start to finish, from the time you write your business plan to the day you're open for business. That project price, if you can come in to the table with 10% of that in your own injection, then we really have something to work with. Now, sometimes that 10% is formulated through grants, perhaps, or equipment that's already owned, or some other form of injection that you've already made. So it doesn't necessarily need to be hard cash. And the programs out there are always changing, and there's what we call gap financing companies that will close the gap between what the bank can do and what you have. So always exceptions, but if you have it in the back of your mind somewhere around 10% of the total project, that's a good place to start.
Okay. So, Joy, I'm thinking, what should a person be thinking about when they're trying to identify what kind of business they want to get into? I mean, is it always going to be a case where, like, wow, I have this great idea to build this widget that's going to be amazing? Or how does one perceive a need for what kind of business might be successful?
Well, I know, so every business is unique and every opportunity is unique, but I think really understanding that there is an opportunity, find something that's not being done well, or a population that's not being served, or, you know, the spokes of opportunity, I think, are different in every business. You know, I'm in the retail business, so I said, okay, I would love to open a store, but I had no idea what type of store it would be. Manchester is known for shopping, and what are we missing in this store? I decided to just listen to my girlfriends, you know, because as you talk, and what are they complaining about? What can't they find in Manchester? And I really had no idea what that was going to be. And messages about, you know, bras and lingerie and under things that I sell just came to me. I had one friend who had a teenage daughter, you know, ready, and she was going to have to drive an hour to buy something for her teenage daughter, or wait till she goes on vacation in Florida. Another friend who's very athletic, you know, there was nothing in Manchester that was going to serve her needs, skiing and doing yoga, and it was literally like ding, 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 oh my God, this is the retail opportunity. So I don't know if every circumstance is like that, but that's how it happened for me. So I think there's people who grow up and say, someday I would like to, sell coffee cups, or someday I would like to build a house, you know, have a business that refurbishes houses or furniture or whatever it is. But is there an actual need? How are you going to needle your way through and identify a population that's going to want what you have? So sometimes it's not always your dream, you know, what you grew up dreaming a business would be, but if you truly want to be in business, you know, finding the opportunity, and hopefully it's something you like, obviously.
I think there are a lot of times there's a misconception that even if there are other places that have exactly the same thing, that yours is going to be different because it's you. And that doesn't often work. And we have found, and I know you have all experienced that, you know, if you want to open a sandwich shop and there's 10 of them within 10 blocks, and you're going to make a better pastrami sandwich, that means that, first of all, the places where people have been going for the last 10 years to get their pastrami sandwich, they're going to have to pull the
convert them.
business away from them. So they're very loyal here in Vermont. So they love their pastrami sandwiches or whatever. So they got to pull the business away from their friend. But before they do that, they have to try yours. And if yours isn't better, forget it. They're not going to come back usually here, but they may try it one more time. But so you're pulling it away from loyal. So you get this loyalty thing. So you got to pull it. You have to be better. There has to be a reason to stay. Then you have to try to bring new markets in. You have to target who those customers are going to be, and then understand that you're going to be potentially, if there's a lot of them around you, unlike you found a niche that there aren't a lot of them around you. But for some reason, people tend to think just because it's them or because they know a few people in the area that all my friends are going to buy this. And it's a very difficult thing to have that conversation. So, and we do. Oftentimes they still open it, and oftentimes it doesn't work. Occasionally it does, but that's the hardest thing. You got to really figure out who your market is. Who's your target market? How are you going to find them? How do they get their communication? I mean, literally, how do they get it? Do they read the newspaper? Do they go on Facebook? If they read the newspaper, if you're putting in air conditioners in senior citizens' homes as a living, so that's what you do. You come in there, you put them in the summer, you take them out in the winter, you do a few odd jobs for them. Are you going to use tweets? No.
Right. Yeah.
Probably
That is
not,
true.
right? So you're going to put an ad in the local
Right.
giveaway newspaper,
Right.
and are you going to use number 3 font?
Probably
Probably not,
Yeah.
right? You're gonna right. So
Know your
there's so
customer.
many
Big
things.
letters.
I mean,
There's
I
so
know I'm
many
going
things.
into the weeds a little bit, but
Yeah.
she did it perfectly because she found out who you know what it was that wasn't being met in her area, and got good feedback, and then went from there and had her own challenges for just being retail and just being business and just being in Vermont. But she did the first part right, and that's the hardest thing to do.
I think in a diluted market like a sandwich place or coffee shops, let's take coffee shops because there are a lot of them and new ones come. And so within a field, there is opportunity. Sometimes it's being higher price, sometimes it's being lower price. It's understanding where someone is being underserved. Everybody likes sandwiches, everybody likes coffees. But who is being underserved? If you like very fancy sandwiches and ladies who lunch type sandwiches, and there's no place to have that, maybe go
There
in
it
that
is.
direction.
There's the niche, yeah.
So it's finding, which isn't always what your heart's in. If your heart's in hoagies, your heart's in hoagies, but you're already, in Philadelphia, sometimes you already got people doing good cheesesteaks.
But that goes back to the dream that you had.
Right,
I've always wanted to
right.
have a sandwich shop where
Yeah,
we make hoagies, and
just want to be a business person.
but
Just be in
you
business.
have to be able to
Is
do
there a
this,
market to
right?
serve?
Yeah,
And you have to pivot.
By the time folks get to you, Al and Dwight, do they have that business plan usually pretty well roughed out and put together, or is it usually typically the case like you kind of read it and go, "Oh my, we have to do some work here"? Is
A little bit of both. I mean,
Okay.
some folks have it all gelled, ready to go, like we were talking about before. I had somebody, mid-20s, just had a fantastic mindset, knew exactly what she wanted to do. I kind of gave her the litany of things that we would need. She came back the next day with all of them, resume, business plan. And she'd done the business plan with the Small Business Development Center.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Yeah.
she was on the right track, and within 10 days we had her off and running.
Okay.
So.
Now, what about subsequent following up financing? I mean, like credit lines. Is that something that a business plan should anticipate needing to have access to further capital, just in case the startup capital isn't going to be adequate?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. In Vermont, probably 85% of the businesses, no matter what you're in, are seasonal in some way, shape, or form. There's seasonality to it, which means ebbs and flows and cash flow. And the absolute worst thing your bank or credit union or finance provider can do is underfund you. So from day one, we would rather raise the size of the project and make sure you have the adequate credit lines in place than to have you call 30 days in and say, oh boy, this didn't launch as quickly as I expected it to. Can I have that umbrella because 2 hours ago it started raining? And I'll give you a perfect example. We financed a bed and breakfast years ago in the Deerfield Valley down near Wilmington, and we did put the credit line in place at the day of closing. And thank heavens that we did, because the day after closing, the new owner discovered that all 25 mattresses were garbage. So he couldn't realistically open up without immediately drawing on that credit line for that immediate capital improvement that he had to have in order to open the doors. And it made the difference in his success over the long haul.
So we have to think past the first 30 days and think a little bit more long-term when we're,
Yeah, cash
thinking
flow is no joke, owning a business. I mean, it is truly one of the hardest things, especially in Vermont. There's certain months that are more flush. July for us is our biggest month.
Yeah, ours
For a lot of people. So, getting to July when you're dealing with vendors, again, I'm in retail, you're dealing with vendors who want payment when they ship you an item. You can't sell an item till you have it on your floor. By the time it gets to you, 5 days, they ship it to you, you get it 2, 3, 4 days later, you get it onto the floor, it's already hit your credit card, which you have so many days to pay, and the reality is you're not going to sell all that merchandise. So you always, in retail anyway, have to be very extended. So cash flow is something I didn't really understand, or you could read every article in Forbes magazine, but until there's only 28 days in February and your bills are due on the 1st versus other months where you have 31 days to make your payments. I mean, this is like real situation being in business. I don't want to dissuade anyone from going into business, but those things matter. I mean, making your March 1st bill is harder because February only has 28 days to sell stuff.
That's a really good point. And you also bring up a
Things to
good
think
point
about.
with inventory, because you're in a business that you have. I mean, the back room is. I mean, how many pieces of product do you have? Like 5,000.
At least 5,000 bras.
So
Yes.
so here's a situation where what you see in the front has nothing to do with what's in the back, and
Yeah.
every single thing in there has already been paid for. So her inventory is taking up, a lot of her cash, but she has to have it.
Yeah, we don't know
So
who's
it's
gonna
not
want that.
optional. It's not one of those
Yeah.
deals where here, I'll order it for you, come back because.
The lingerie is one of those SKU intensive, thinking back, I didn't really understand that either. There's a lot of SKUs, they want a tan black and white one if you have it. If you don't have it, then you only sell a tan one. So, it's actually, I was talking with one of my employees that it's the calculus of retail.
Yeah.
So whatever,
That's right.
It really
still
is.
here. But that's why I could never imagine a restaurant, who sells, say, oysters.
Right.
The shelf life on oysters is not very big, and the fisherman, the oyster guy, wants his money when you get the oysters, and you have a very limited amount of time to sell this somewhat expensive item, or else there's no value anymore.
Right.
So
Right.
I mean, the
Perishable,
restaurants. I mean, you talk about cash flow. If it's a rainy day like this, I don't know what that means for the restaurant business, but people may say, yeah, I'm going to stay in and make dinner instead of going out. Snowstorm, kills it. And oh my God, I just bought all this prime rib and nobody's coming to dinner tonight. So the challenges of cash is king. All the things that you hear the little nuances of are so true. Cash is king.
There's a feeling that we hear often that if a business needs a credit line, that's a negative symptom.
What is it with
It's
that?
actually a very positive symptom.
Yeah.
More
Yes.
often than not, a business needs a credit line because they're growing, and or they have an opportunity that they'd like to capitalize on, like a discount from a vendor.
Right.
If they pay at delivery, oftentimes the discount from the vendor is twice as much than we would charge in interest to use that money for the month and draw on the line. Growing businesses consume cash. They tie up the working capital more and more as they continue to grow because it's coming in and it's going out, hopefully at a pace that makes sense, right? You'll hear us talk a lot about forecasts for cash flow. And why that's important is we're looking for cash burn. In the first year of the forecast of a startup business, we really want to see month to month how much is coming in and how much is going out to allow that business owner to adjust to their cash flow cycle. How quick are they really collecting the funds and how quick is that inventory really turning? Because a difference of 5 days average in inventory turn or a receivables turn can make the difference between having enough to make the payroll and not.
Yes.
Almost all businesses that fail, or a vast majority of those that fail, don't fail because they fail to make a profit or have a healthy profit margin. It's because they fail to manage cash flow.
That's exactly right. I mean, sales, driving revenue sometimes isn't the problem. I mean, every day you sell things, and it's really astounding. And in 5 years of business, I've been up, down, whatever, but it truly is astounding when you sell things, but then the timing of when bills are due, every month there's rent. For me, every other week there's payroll. I mean, these are things you have to pay. You have to pay vendors to get merchandise, and it's really astounding, the timelines of cash. The delay, one thing that I didn't realize going into business, and again, it's retail, but it kind of hospitality, anything, credit cards, people are encouraged to use credit cards. It's very easy to use credit cards. The cost of credit cards on a business is something I certainly did not have an understanding of. And, the credit card companies just kind of take these credit card fees from your bank account every month. It's a very hard to understand statement. Depending on the card, if the customer is getting miles, it's a higher percentage on that sale that the business owner pays. I mean, that is something, I did not understand at all. And now when you look back at the end of the year at your P&L, you're just like, oh my goodness, I spent this much just so.
It was 3%.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
For convenience for the customer.
Right, which I want it to be convenient for the customer, but, there's no but. I want it to be convenient for the customer, of course. But the cost to a business is definitely something on those initial business plans and thoughts. It's something I did not really have a full understanding of.
Well, it's completely out of your control.
Yeah, it is.
You say, I want to take Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, which is great. But which MasterCard and Visa are they going to pull out? It makes the difference in whether your profit margin is.
Well, then I know which one I pull out. The one when I get the miles.
Sure.
Yeah. And the businesses pay more.
Sure.
Yeah. So that is definitely something. And, consumers, people who understand that, there are locals every day, they pay cash. They write a check because, I've talked to them at cocktail parties or whatever, just about, like, I can't believe this. So that's very kind. But I know the reality is we just don't live in a world anymore where people pay cash or write checks,
So 20th century, right?
What?
So 20th century.
So yeah, there's progress. There's progress, and it is very incentivizing. I mean, these credit card companies are great marketers, amazing. Hotel points, plane points, free gifts. So I totally get that, and I try to use credit cards in my own business where I get the most incentive too. The American Express Plum Card will give you cash back, to help pay your bill, to make your bill a little lower than their gold card or, whatever.
Yeah.
There's different, so I try to do that in my own business too. But that's something I think consumers don't understand, which I'm not putting the burden on them. I think as a business person wanting to open a business, I try to, not be a naysayer, but the costs are very real of doing business.
Well, can't you build in that credit card fee into the price of the merchandise?
Well,
Isn't
that's,
that part of the idea?
I guess one could. My merchandise that I sell most of it comes tagged with the price on it. Now it's very easy for consumers to scan. So if I were to add $1 or $2 to every sale, every piece of every nightgown, it's consumers, I don't want to, I don't want to do that. I get, it is an opportunity, you're right.
But the market will only tolerate so much margin.
Yeah, the market
And you're
will only.
competing with Amazon with free
Yes.
delivery.
Yes, I'm fortunate that my category is a little protected, but you're right. Can only take so much margin. Most things are keystone, in retail 50%. There are items that maybe are more, sometimes more luxury items, there's actually more margin in there, but they cost more to stock in your store. As part of those 5,000 bras, my most expensive bras are where there's the most margin opportunity, most dollar opportunity, but they are expensive to hold too. So it's it's complicated, as they say. But the costs of doing business are so much more than rent. So like on a business plan, when you write kind of your fixed cost and utilities and all that.
Well, when we get business plans in, or when we work with people to do business plans in the Small Business Development Center, SCORE, whoever they work with, one of the first things I look for is that, are you putting in your merchant fees? That's the
Right.
credit card fees. Are you putting in your insurance costs?
Right.
And these are things that people really don't realize. So when they bring their stuff to me, I go right down that list. You forgot this one. You forgot this one. Who's going to buy toilet paper? You got a bathroom. Customers use it. I mean, I don't want to be petty here, but you're going to need supplies. So if somebody who's had experience can help with that business plan, and either give the potential business owner a list of those, like here's a template of 50 things. You may not need all of them, but go down that list and think logically about when you own the business, are you going to buy toilet paper? Are you going to have merchant, credit card fees? Are you going to need insurance? Yeah. Well, then they start getting on the phone to find out those costs, which is
Right.
great. We want them to do that.
More knowledge is power, for
Yes,
sure.
exactly, because then when they come back, they're looking at a different margin, and they're saying, oh, geez, maybe that dollar's now been squeezed down to only 50% when I look at, who cares about the rent? Like you said, it is what it is. But when you start adding in those little overhead costs and the smaller things, and then if you get employees, that has a lot of stuff involved too. Now, it doesn't mean that that's a bad thing or that you shouldn't go into business. But knowledge is power.
Yeah.
That is exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to discourage anybody. It's, the American dream, that's how I feel, this is. I mean, I'm living it. I wish I just had a little, it's hard to take everything into account.
The
to
first
say
thing-
Eyes
something.
open.
Yeah, the cost
But the more you know,
cost of
if you
business.
still decide to go do
And
it,
I mean,
at least you know that potentially it's going to be different than it looked maybe a month ago before you started looking. And that's fine. And we take risks. Business entrepreneurs take risks, and we know that, and we still feel so good about it, and that's great. But at least our knowledge is there, and we know that there could be a chance that we're going to have a smaller margin. Our profits aren't going to be quite the same. Maybe it's going to take a little longer to get to the point where we have, 1,000 customers that we can call or email or do whatever. And we still want to do it, and that's great. But if you just pretend it's not there, then that's where the problem comes in.
The first thing I like to see in a business plan is, are they paying themselves?
Right.
Because look at the earning that they have now, the lifestyle that they lead, and does this potential idea provide a reasonable lifestyle for them? We find that a business is better than twice as likely to be successful when they've done a comprehensive business plan and analyzed their profitability and the viability of their idea. And it isn't because necessarily that it's been thought through more, it's that many eliminate themselves when they realize, wow,
Yeah.
in order to make money selling those coffee cups, I need to work 20 hours a day, and the best case scenario, in years 10, I can pay myself $10 an hour. I'm out. I might own my own business, but it's not going to be doing this. And they discover that early on, and that's better for them and better for the bank.
Yes.
A common myth of the business plan is that it's just a document, a report that helps you get a loan. It's actually a working document. It helps you discover for yourself, do you understand what you're getting into? And where are there opportunities to tweak if for some reason some piece of this doesn't work the way you think it should? I met with a farmer the other day, complete and total success story within the last 10 years, gone from one employee up to 35. And she said the biggest shocker to me is we're selling these this pepper sauce that we just did for kicks in the kitchen while we grew vegetables for sale. Now this pepper sauce revenue stream is driving the entire bus. And it's less seasonal, it's more controlled, and we can watch our margins, and we're adjusting. That ended up being her success story, but she's constantly going back to that business plan, looking for opportunities to improve her profitability and tweak her approach.
Now we're going to talk to her about exporting.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, success is based on your ability to adjust. And, you know, the farmer might, oh, but I want to be this farmer and have these fields. But, you know, if the pepper sauce is driving the bus,
Right.
there's
Go
being
with
noble and righteous. And, you know, let's really focus on where an opportunity is. I mean, we've done that in my business with sleepwear. I didn't really consider sleepwear or even swimwear. We sell a little bit of swimwear, you know, but as the same women are coming in, boy, they also would buy this. And then I see sleepwear, there's different margin opportunities than, you know, lingerie. So, but yeah, that's a great story.
If you really want to understand cash flow,
Yeah.
talk to the person that plows your driveway.
Yeah,
Because the guy that or gal that plows your driveway,
Yeah.
the successful ones, half their contracts are per storm and half are per season. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
They've insulated themselves from the seasonality and the weather-related risks associated with tying up $50,000 for a plow truck and a sander and a plow.
yeah.
I've
Yes.
worked with so many of those that do the lawn
Yeah.
care in the summer and do plowing in the winter.
Same idea.
And yeah, and the ones that do only the per storm, I get the phone call every winter, you know, when we're having what we think of as a good winter because we're not, you know, getting 9 feet of snow in 3 days, and they're frantic and they're needing that
Yeah,
credit
they
line.
have to put gas in the truck and the
and make
plow
the
brakes
payments for
and
that plow
make it
that they
right.
bought at the beginning of the season.
And the answer isn't all per storm or all per
Exactly,
season. The
it's a
answer is
good
the
mix.
combination
Right.
and what mix works best for your market and your contracts.
Yeah.
A really good conversation to have with those that have figured that out.
Well, in Vermont, I think that is great. You know, the snow plowers, the lawn cutters, the gardeners. It's really important that those billing cycles definitely are kind of what's the word? You know, averaged out, or there's, you know, it's not, you're not just all, you know, you're not waiting 90 days to send that bill. You're trying to get some deposit in advance. You know, all that sort of stuff is really important to diversify when your cash is coming in.
And a lot of
Yeah.
banks will offer seasonality of payments where you can make just the principal payment,
Right.
just the interest payments for a period of time. And then during mud season and stick season, maybe you don't make the principal
Right.
payments.
So
but they're
sugaring
concentrated.
businesses, that happens a lot.
Perfect
Yeah.
example.
So making maple syrup, you know, it happens all at one time.
Right.
You know, they get all their money at one time. And so oftentimes the banks will allow them to, or the lenders, whoever that might be, to do interest-only payments during the off-season and then just like pay all the principal payments when they get their big payment.
Correct.
Beef cattle, same thing, because that's long-term. I
That's
mean,
right.
if you have, you know, pigs and goats, those are short-term and you turn those over a little easier. But when you have cattle, we're talking years.
Long cash flow cycle.
All the money has to be up front.
That's right.
And then you got to feed them the whole time, and you're still not making any money
That's
until
right.
boom,
Cash.
everything happens after 3 years or whatever it is. So all businesses are different, you know, and all areas are different. And I wanted to address this really quickly too, because we're very fortunate in Vermont, depending on where you live. And you were talking about gap lending. There are oftentimes economic development organizations or downtown organizations or that have a little pot of money that might be available to do signage, let's say. They want all the signs to look the same downtown, so they might have a pot of money that says, look, we'll give you a matching grant. We'll give, you know, if you have 500, we'll give you the other 500 so that your sign will look like everybody else's. We know you can't afford to buy these expensive signs or whatever.
Really?
Yeah, there are there are places that do this. Solar panels on your roof. If you'll do that, you know, maybe the Department of Energy will give you a matching grant. Matching grants are very popular right
Yes.
now. But you have to be in an area that has it or work with someone that knows that stuff. And these business advisors and lenders oftentimes have access to those.
Right.
That's right. First step is get that small business development counselor through the SBA or one of Chris's offices to be the quarterback for your treatment team.
Yeah.
Have someone on your team as an attorney, as a tax advisor, tax preparer, or accountant, depending on your level of sophistication, your insurance agent, and your banker. But make sure that someone is tying together all these programs that might apply to you for the best solution, rather than try to wear all those hats yourself.
Yeah, tax advice and accounting advice is absolutely, and a good bookkeeper, you know, and they, in many companies, your bookkeeper or accountant person is your highest paid employee, deservedly so. You know, investing in that, don't think that you can do the QuickBooks by yourself. I mean,
Thank you for saying that. Oh my gosh.
you know,
Please don't try to learn that in
can't
3
be good at
days and do everything.
Yeah, you can't be good at everything. And investing in advice from a tax professional, that's absolutely one of the first things I did. You know, LLC, S Corp, what do all these things mean? I started as one thing, and after a couple of years into it, changed to another thing. Once we saw, you know, the flows of business. But that is, if you truly want to be in business, that cost line on your P&L is one that is super important and vital to the success of your business, I think.
Well, you anticipated at one
Yeah.
point I wanted to
Oh.
build here on here. That's the whole question of business taxes. I mean,
Oh.
business income is taxed differently from personal income, right?
Yeah.
But there's also some procedures you need to go through with the department, the State Department of Taxes, State Department of Labor, if you're going to have employees. Another whole question
Yeah.
we might want to tackle if we have time. But I mean, someone's starting up with this bright idea. They bring in, what do they need to do when it comes to like registering with the tax department? I mean, you need to send a letter to somebody if they're saying, hey, I'm going into business and I need to do this, and don't I need to get a number
Yeah,
of
you
some
do,
sort?
you do. And then you can apply online. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's one of
easy.
the easiest
You can-
things
That's
that-
one of the
yeah.
easiest
Yeah.
things.
Oh, okay.
You can get a tax ID number, register your name. That's easy.
Okay.
You could do that, yeah, $50, whatever it is, pay the fee.
Yeah.
You're in business.
The SBA puts out a fabulous publication, that Small Business
Yeah.
Resource Guide, that goes into quite a bit of detail, talking about the different business structures, how do I find out more information, how do I register, how do I determine what I want to be.
Okay, so
Yeah, but I would say the toughest thing is when you hire an employee, when you hire your first employee, because there's not just one place you can call and say, just give me a list of everything I need to do. I'm going to hire one person. And so I need to know like what the rates are, and you know, what about workers' comp, and what is the, you know, unemployment insurance thing, and you know, disability, whatever. Just call one. Wouldn't it be great if you could just call one person and have them tell you? And I have been trying to get this for so long so that we can have just a place for people to call. It's tough.
Well, yeah, I mean, corporations, I came from corporate America, you have human resource departments, and that's what these folks do. They hire people, they get, everybody's paid, the taxes and insurance and all that stuff is taken care of, they're recruiting.
Just
you know.
magically.
So, yeah, I mean, they're departments. So coming and starting my own business, basically, this is, you know, the
Yeah, all
HR
departments.
department, the human
Right.
resource department. So you're right, you know, the competition for labor is a whole other topic we could talk about everywhere, but you know, places like Manchester, there's a lot of hospitality, there's a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of hotels, there's a lot of retail stores. So and there's only so many people to do these jobs. So you know, the competition and the cost of that in some markets, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I mean, the rate of pay and workers' compensation, and then you have to think about, well, do we want to have a employee investment plan of some sort, and there's
Medical insurance.
Yeah, I
if
mean,
you do
that's-
that or don't.
right. I mean, talk to your accountant, make sure you can afford that. But yeah, it's really, I mean, hiring employees. It is, and making sure all that paperwork's right. And as the legislature, votes on things like sick pay, do you have the administrative things in place to manage this kind of thing that is, mandated by the state or law? There's a lot of administration. Another cost line, I'm not trying to be negative, but just, another kind of cost of doing business that isn't, rent, utilities, telephone, but.
Is there some point where it's clear that you do need to hire another person? I mean, is it sort of a thing where you say, well, I'm tired of working 16 hours a day here. I need to get some help in. I mean, these
Yeah.
are just sort of know kind of roughly by feel when the time is at hand to hire someone.
Gosh, I can only speak to my own experience, in that, running a store, I
Business
want
tells
two
you.
people there,
Yeah.
for a storefront, for a lot of reasons, safety, whatever, opportunity. From my customer service-oriented business, I wouldn't want someone standing around not being helped, so I want to make sure there are enough employees. But I think, to do the work, for a restaurant, sometimes you need 35 people, with 2 dishwashers, 5 cooks, and waitresses and bartenders. I mean, there's a lot of
And
people in
different
play
shifts and,
on a
yeah.
busy Saturday night at a restaurant. There's a lot of jobs, a lot of managing of employees and hours and schedules and costs and, getting the work done. So I don't know if there's like
I don't think,
real formula.
I don't think there
I
is
don't
sort of
know.
a epiphany moment
Just
where
sort of-
all of a sudden you
you
go,
sort of know.
this is it.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
if you
with-
plow snow, if you don't need another driver, if you can make it, you being the only guy, then
Well, but
Can do
I
that.
like to talk to people about the one accident away from theory. So
that's
that's the snow plowing business. And, for you, you've got employees, you could, the doors could open, you could still sell your product. In my business, my husband and I own a campground, the campground is still there, the power is still on. But I can tell you, and even if the power was off and if it was pouring down rain, I could still get a campground full of people. But if I don't have water, all bets are off. It's against the law. Shut the door. Got to have water. So that's, that kind of stuff is important to know, like what's the one thing or the 2 things that will shut you down, and that you need to avoid that. And one of those things very possibly could be not having enough employees.
yeah.
Right.
Well, I
If
would
you
say if
own a
you're going to hire one
restaurant-
employee, hire that bookkeeper.
Yeah,
That would
right,
be-
exactly.
That would be my
Exactly,
That would
exactly.
be my advice.
But if you're in a
Um,
restaurant and you don't have people to wait tables or a bartender or the
Yeah.
chef or what, I mean, those are really important roles and part of our workforce issue in Vermont. I mean, we have a horrible workforce issue. It's hard to find people. It's hard to find good people to keep them, and people are competing. And
We're trying to attract from out of state now, right? 10,000.
Yeah.
I know. I saw that. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, what? I'm all for ideas, but yeah, the competition for labor is pretty severe, and pay rates,
Wage
go
pressure,
higher.
yeah.
It puts pressure on businesses. Not saying it's right or wrong, but I mean, right. Of course, people need to make a living. There's a whole other host of reasons why we can't afford. 10 years ago, we didn't have these $100 or $200 cell phone bills to pay every month.
Right.
That it's just like added. So it's great to be able to text and stuff, but it is an added cost to everyone's lives to just exist because pretty much you have to have a phone now. So, but it's not just a pay rate, which I think too in your cost line with your business plan, even if you say okay, $12, $15 an hour, whatever it is you're paying someone, it's the cost. The actual cost is a lot higher.
Right.
That's right.
So getting advice from people who know that, and so there's the pay, and then there's how do you want to compete? Is it a discount on your own restaurant? Do you get a free shift meal every time you work? Do you?
That's a really good point.
Do you
Yeah, what are
get
your
free
incentives?
clothes?
And
so
part of the
then-
competition is right here. So the
competition?
banks
Oh wait,
are pulling people away, right? So you're competing with
the
you
banks
know,
are pulling people away.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's retail, but banks are retail. This is where, when I
right.
was in banking,
Oh.
we used to
Oh.
go to retail.
For good
Competing for
people.
talent.
Yeah.
Oh, because if you can sell clothes, maybe you get
Yes.
good.
So,
And the drawers balanced and all of that.
Very important, yeah.
Many of the same characteristics.
Interesting.
The right personality, professionalism.
Got you.
so
livable
it doesn't
wage.
really matter that it's exactly the same type of business. Workforce challenges are right in our own communities, even when they don't look alike.
And another
Interesting.
complication too, I would think, is the seasonality that's been referred to here.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to have an employee on for 12 months a year. Maybe you only really need them for 3.
Yeah.
Do you then work out some arrangement where you keep that employee kind of ready to go? Or
It
do
is
you just
so
say, hey,
hard.
we'll see you next October or whatever, God willing, if they haven't found another job someplace else?
I mean, I find, most of the people that come to me, they're looking for 3 days a week or 5 days a week or, or 2 days a month or, they're kind of looking for something that works with their schedule. And that, as employers, we really have to, sometimes it isn't about what I need, it's what can you bring? Okay, you can do 3 days 3 days a week? Great. Can I get someone else who can do 2 days a week, to complement it? But you're right, July, when, as I said, is our highest revenue month. And so payroll, okay, you can slough that money off. February, that 28 days, or November, and here in Vermont, the seasonality, I mean, those first 2 or 3 weeks of November, those first 2 weeks of December, wow, it is tough, but you still want your employees to have their hours. I can't just say you don't work these 2 weeks. I mean, I can't. I guess there are some businesses because of the seasonality of ski areas and golf courses. But it's definitely, I think in Vermont, we have a bigger challenge with that for sure. Tourism is our major economic driver, at least here in Manchester. So when the tourists are here, it might not be
Very
April
seasonal.
7th,
A
but
lot
July
of
10th.
complicated questions here.
I know,
I
it
hope
is
we haven't
hard.
scared anyone off.
No, no,
And
but
back
I
to what
think the power.
Dwayne was saying, the seasonality. I mean, you have folks that just have to pair seasons together in order to
Yes.
cobble it all together, right? And it's just, if you're doing something in the winter like snow removal, then in the summer you have to do the opposite of that, landscaping
Right.
and cobble. So
Right.
Right.
And maple
Sugar
syrup
in
in
between.
between.
yeah,
Right.
right. In the
Yeah,
winter, that other
make
season.
sure for 3 weeks. And
Well,
Yes.
just to kind of bring some closure to all of this, boy, this is a fascinating conversation. I've got a funny feeling we could talk for another hour or so, but I guess I was just wondering, and Dwight, maybe I'll throw this one to you first. I was wondering, do you think it's harder nowadays for folks to start up their own business? I mean, I just read an article a couple of weeks ago, I think in the Wall Street Journal, about how small business was getting squeezed by larger corporations. That basically it's just between the labor issue, between just the financial questions, it was just a case where there's more and more consolidation going on in the American economy, probably in the global economy as well. And I guess I found myself wondering, wow, if I was like 25 or 30 years old again and had big ideas about this fantastic gizmo that I wanted to bring to the market, would it be harder to do that today? Or are there more challenges for someone who wanted to try that?
I think it'll challenge your intellect more. I'm not sure it's necessarily more difficult. What I mean by that is there's products and services through the SBA, through the area banks, through your local communities that are far and away better than what we had 20 years ago. And we're in a climate where rates and terms continue to be favorable. That said, there's a lot more competition. There's a lot more regulation that we all live under. So you really do need to come up with the best mousetrap in order to be successful. I used to finance for years a lot of bed and breakfasts. And they, some would do well and some wouldn't do well. But the ones that did the best were the ones that differentiated. My favorite one was, the gentleman and his wife came to finance the inn, and I said, what are you going to do to stand out? He said, I'm going to stand out because you can bring your horse when you stay at my place for the weekend. Who else can say that within a 100-mile radius? Now, he knew his market, he differentiated himself, he put a little bit more thought into it, and he had the venue. It was a tremendous success, and he ended up selling the business. So you really have to sharpen your pencil. Be careful of the both fixed costs and unknown costs. Use your treatment team and resources available out there. But it's absolutely doable to start a business and be very successful at it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it then on
that's a
that.
good way to
It can be done,
Yes,
folks.
it can be done.
We do it every day.
All right. Well, great. Thank you all so much for being here today, and a really interesting, stimulating conversation. I want to thank Chris Harriman from the SBA, Joy Prof from Joy All Things Under Things,
Thank you.
Al Clausen, and Dwight Williams from the Berkshire Bank. And thank all of you for being with us today, too. I hope you found it an interesting show, and we'll be back again real soon with another edition of Life Skills. Until then, have a great day. Thank you for watching.